This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by my good buddy, Adam Emmert. Adam, it's the off season. We are now, but we have a new captain at the helm of USS Seattle Seahawks, John Schneider, taking the helm.
I mean, he's just no longer a co-captain. Now he's the solo captain. Interesting press conference from John this week. Kind of the first one we've gotten from the Seahawks organization now here in the post Pete Carroll era. And I thought there was some interesting stuff in there to kind of glean, some funnier stuff as well. And maybe some clues as to the direction that the team is going to go here, not just in the head coaching search, but possibly roster wise as well.
Yeah, we got some ideas of what John thinks about the status of the current roster. He gave us some direction of some of the things that have changed or will be changing with his role. So we want to be sure and get into some of that. Also, I did sense maybe a little bit more clues of trying to figure out what happened, why John's still here, why Pete's gone, what may have happened and led to that. I picked up a few clues. I don't know if you did.
I maybe got more of a feeling listening to the first part of the press conference than maybe a clue, but
yeah,
for me, it definitely felt as if John was, number one, bummed, like legitimately bummed that his work wife is now gone. And two, that he kind of felt that they had one more year to make this go, that he maybe wasn't quite ready for this. But again, a feeling, I don't know that you can point to any one statement, but that's just kind of how it hit me.
Well, one thing is clear from even his initial comments. Once the press conference even first started, the thing that came across loud and clear is that John Schneider believes that the Seahawks, the team underachieved in 2023.
You know, unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at this, we are all here today because we underachieved in 2023. We all did. And now we're in a situation where, you know, we all need to get better. And we understand that the 12s, the fans, the community, Jody, everybody in this building deserves better. We had high expectations for 2023. You know, we overachieved in 2022, and quite frankly, we underachieved in 2023. And I think everybody recognizes that. But again, it's a time for all of us to look in the mirror in this organization, myself included, obviously, and improve, learn, and move forward. You know, Pete Carroll. So we could have, Pete and I could split today and have podcasts for years on end and just sit and riff about all the decisions, all the discussions, all the debates, the ups, the downs, everything we've been through. We've been so blessed to have that relationship. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have hooked up with Pete.
You know, there's one thing that I know, just based off that last part of the commentary from John Schneider. If there's any animosity between those guys, he's not talking about doing a podcast with Pete Carroll. Like, that's reserved for doing stuff with your friends.
Usually, yes, absolutely. And I don't know that I got a feeling of animosity from Pete's presser. I mean, I definitely did not, because he was talking Johnny up, and definitely felt the same way here. These two guys have had each other's backs for 14 years. And I don't think that there was any animosity in their day-to-day work either. It seems like that they worked really, really well together and understood how to run a team together, not necessarily like one dude being in charge at all times. And, you know, that's kind of something that you've heard the national media a bit, you know, oh, John's got his chance now to run it.
Well, part of that, I think, comes from Pete, too, because, you know, as I was listening back to Pete and listening to John, I got more of a sense that maybe Pete Carroll actually fell on the sword when it comes to, one staying and one going. I more get the sense that, yeah, Pete wanted John to have the opportunity. And it goes back to Pete Carroll's final press conference because Pete was asked, how excited are you to see just what John does with this team? And this was Pete's response.
Oh, no, it's why this happened. You want to know? Because I want him to have this chance. It's been 14 years he's been sitting there waiting for his opportunity, and he deserves it. And he's great at what he does. And now he's going to find out. We'll find out, big fella. And he deserves this moment. And I was cheerleading for him. And if there's nothing else that was part of this factor, that was the biggest factor from my input. Somebody asked the question, and I gave you the answer. It was to help make sure that he could have this opportunity, and he's going to go for it, and I would do whatever I could to help him be successful still.
So when I take that response in context, along with John's response of talking about the team underachieving in 2023 after maybe overachieving the year prior, and really talking about it as a, saying we all did underachieve, it kind of makes me wonder if it was everybody goes and Pete maybe doing that cheerleading for John about, hey, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah, he definitely has John's back and wants to see him have the opportunity. He makes that pretty darn clear. And I think John is excited to have that little bit more control that maybe he didn't have before. With all that said, too, I don't know, man. The whole, overachieved and then underachieved. And it's like, okay, so they massively overachieved the year before, in my opinion. And I think most people agree, especially if you look at what they had been predicted to do that year. And then they underachieved this year. And if you want to talk about run defense, then yeah, they massively underachieved on run defense. If you want to take the stat that keeps people in jobs or out of jobs, and that's wins and losses, it's the ultimate stat. It feels as if maybe they underachieved by 2 games? I feel like the amount of underachievement was so much lesser than the overachievement the year before that they should have had the opportunity to make a go of it this next year. I think really maybe the biggest Achilles heel in the whole thing, and maybe this is why John gets to stick around and Pete has to go, is the biggest problem seemed to be, in my opinion, the change to the 3-4. It flat didn't work. Maybe Pete wanted to stick with it for another year. Maybe he wasn't ready to move on from Clint Hurt, all that sort of stuff. I don't know. But the one thing that's definitely clear from Pete's presser is that while John sits there and says we all underachieved, I'm not 1,000% sure that John massively overachieved in any place. I have some complaints, but man, I can definitely think of general managers that make me 30 times more crazy than John Schneider does.
Yeah, and there are some ways where, there's some areas that we criticize Schneider in this past year that kind of led toward the team not having as much success, I think. But it's hard to also really tease out which of those may have been Pete Carroll decisions versus John Schneider decisions. And the one thing that's going to be clear moving forward is we're going to know whose decision it was because it's John Schneider's show now.
Basically, the role changes, our setup earlier was, and it's been a question for a number of years, the coaching staff did not fall under my umbrella, and now it will. And it's not necessarily a Jody Allen decision or choosing this person or that person. It's just a contractual situation.
And so we know that his role has changed. And I wonder, too, if this is another clue toward the idea of kind of like how you were talking about, maybe Pete wasn't really open to moving on from any of his coordinators. He seemed very loyal to that idea in his final press conference. And this kind of speaks to that idea of, okay, I'm going to have control over the coaches now. And coaching, who stays in which coaching positions.
Yeah, I mean, at least have final say, right? I imagine whoever you bring in as a head coach, you're going to let them, for the most part, bring in their guys for their staff. It may be more like, okay, at the end of a year when they sit down and one of them's like, I want a guy to stay and I want a guy to go, then John just has the final say. But honestly, kind of a small change in his role. It doesn't feel like a huge deal overall.
It does lead me, though, to one of my favorite moments of the press conference when he was asked, like, what does this opportunity mean for you to really have a shot to run the franchise, right? And I mean, because I think you get this impression that, it's the Pete Carroll show when it's not.
It's certainly what the national pundits thought, man. And that's what you heard on all the talking head shows. But John, he begs to differ.
So here was John's comments about, what it means for him now to have a shot at running the Seahawks.
I don't feel like it's like I haven't been running the organization. I understand the question, but I feel like I don't feel like there's been necessarily just one person running the organization.
It catches him off guard in a sense that it's like, well, wait a second, I have been running it, but I think he was getting at in the answer too. He understands that there's a difference, and maybe it means something a little bit different, but to him, it's not really going to change a whole lot.
It's not, and there was a couple of other answers here from John that gave me the impression that in many ways there may not be a ton of things that really do change. I think one of the questions he was asked was something about the roster and how close they were to competing for a championship, or if he felt like they were close.
Yep. He was asked how he views the current makeup of the team.
I think it's a young, talented team that is, feels like they're right on the cusp. I think there's a lot of guys that have a ton of confidence in their abilities. They're all very highly disappointed in what just happened. I think to a man, they would all tell you that, and I know this from the exit interviews that I had, that we still should be playing, and everybody was very disappointed. But I think it's a great core. I think I think we're a very attractive job because of that. There's young talent all over the place. I think we're the fourth youngest team in the league or something like that, and the Packers were number one, I guess, first team since 1977 to make the playoffs. So, yeah.
This is kind of the core pitch, right, to all of the prospective coaches out there. Hey, we've got this great core of players that makes this job attractive. Hey, we've got a bunch of guys that thought that they should still be playing as we go into the playoffs. And oh, by the way, it's the fourth youngest roster, and the Packers team that snuck in ahead of us has the first youngest. So we were competing with this other young team, and we're right there.
And you get to be in a geographically wonderful place to live. And you've got, Lake Washington on the shores of the shores of Lake Washington right there on the practice field at the VMAC. And then, he was asked, well, do you think this is a roster that's close to contending for a championship? And his answer was, yeah, like fast, like, yeah. And right there was when I was like, oh, okay. I don't think there's going to be massive changes to this roster. There's obviously going to be some, but I think he believes that they're pretty close, and maybe with just the right guy to come in and, add a different dash of energy might be the difference. And I think that's going to be interesting, especially because one of the other things that he really referenced was the culture in how it's respected around the league.
Yeah.
So does that mean he doesn't want that to change much? And if so, does that rule out certain coaching candidates just based on personality, right?
I think it might. And that was one of the things he did reference early on, is that he has a clear directive from owner Jody Allen on how to go about moving forward, and culture was a component that he talked about.
You know, we have a clear directive from Jody Allen moving forward as we embark on our new coaching search. It's clear, it's concise. You know, we want to keep our positive culture, everything that's been created here, everything in this building. There's so many special people in this building. It's amazing to be on the phone with all these agents and the people that are interested in this position, and to be able to explain to them, you know, like, hey, you know, there's a foundation here that's incredible.
So does that rule out maybe some of the coaches that you don't think of as being culturally positive? You know, we haven't seen an interview with Belichick be scheduled while he's been interviewing with the Falcons twice. And it reminds me of one of the things that bothered me the most about when Jim Mora came on board as head coach for the Seahawks, because he came in and he was already on Mike Holmgren's staff as the assistant coach, or I know he was the secondary coach. And in his opening press conference, he talked about how he needed to change. He was here to change the culture. And that comment bothered me so much about Jim Mora, because for one, this is a culture that you had been brought into. And two, it was a winning culture. It was the most winning culture under Mike Holmgren over a number of years. Why are you coming in to change it?
Yeah, the
So
arrogance, right?
Yeah. And so I'm glad that it's at least coming down from the top that, hey, we've got a good culture here.
Right. And I mean, as a head coach, you're going to impart some things that are your culture as well. You're just going to have to find dudes that are compatible. It makes me wonder about Dan Quinn a bit, because, like, okay, he was here twice, and, you know, obviously he's a Pete disciple and all that. And so that seems like it would be a seamless fit. But then aren't you just hiring a guy to try to out Pete Carroll at being Pete Carroll? Like, if that's the case, like, wouldn't you just keep the guy who invented it, like Pete Carroll? Like, I,
Right.
I don't understand how you can bring in somebody who's, you know, that close, because you want to keep the culture, and expect him to be more of that, a better version of that, when the OG is the guy who's obviously the best at it. So I wonder if that slightly disqualifies Dan Quinn there. Like, and then I think about Vrabel, right? Like, that's the guy I think I would like to see. I don't have huge feelings about it. I think there's lots of good choices, but I'm not sure that he's a guy that, I mean, he's kind of a hard ass. He'll ride dudes, you know? And I think this team could use that a little bit, especially with the way the young locker room kind of behaved towards the end of the season.
I think they could use it. I also think that that's something that you can bring in coordinators that have that type of thing too. So where you can have that mentality toward the top and still have guys that, you know, I think the important part is having veterans on the team that can do that part of the job for you, to where that's really not as much of a part of the coach's role as it is players within the locker room. And that's something, when I think back to the LOB era, is that you had so many serious guys on the team that they didn't have any time for nonsense, and it ended up showing out on the football field.
It did. So yeah, I think you do need a couple more, you know, the OGs in the locker room, if you can do that. Basically, KJ has alluded to that multiple times on his pod. And then also the assistant coaches as well are the people that can help bring that. You made a good point there. So yeah, it's going to be absolutely fascinating what they do there. They asked John too a bit about offensive and defensive coaches, and I don't know that I got anything out of that made me think that they might go one way or the other. I know a lot of the fan base, one way or the other, has big feelings about it. I listened to Matthew Hasselbeck talk about it, and Matt was like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically, I could give two rips if they're offensive or defensive. We just need a dude who can set or maintain the culture, hold guys accountable, yada, 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 do all the things that head coaches do in terms of just team management, and be sure to hire good coordinators at that point.
I think we did get a little bit of a sense of some of the qualities, though, from John Schneider in this answer in particular, because he was asked about what excites him the most about going into this coaching search process?
I think the learning, evolving, looking forward, where's the game going? 14 years is a long time for one coach to be in a spot, right? And it's been incredible. God rest his soul, Marty Schottenheimer would always tell me, one coach can't stay in one spot for more than 10 years. He retired when I was with him in Kansas City for a year. And it's just that opportunity to learn from all these people that are doing incredible things, in college football and around the National Football League. And you cannot, if you're stagnant in this league, you're behind. So I think that's probably the most intriguing thing, is to learn and be open-minded.
And you could take this commentary one of two ways. You could take this as a potential indictment on the former coach, Pete Carroll, that was there, or look at it as qualities that they could be looking for in coaches moving forward, because he talked about, people doing new things and where the game is going. And you could say that is, maybe Pete didn't have that same vision of this is what we want to do. And making the commentary of 14 years being in the same spot, and how that's a long time. Obviously, that's more on the indictment side. And he talked about being stagnant in the league and that leaving you behind. But then again, going to that idea of being open-minded and learning. So those are maybe one of those qualities of looking for a new coach as well.
Yeah, I mean, as far as how you take that from John, I mean, he basically set it up and perfectly. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're even a great coach like Marty Schottenheimer. You get somewhere for that long, and you only have so many ideas as a human being. Like, you can't have them all, and you can't continue to come up with bangers year after year after year for your entire life. I mean, you're going to run out at some point. And I think that's all he was trying to say there. And so you're like, okay, if we're moving on, then here are things to get excited about. We're excited about the learning. We're excited about the innovation. We're excited about the idea of evolving. He did talk a little bit about the idea of bringing in an offensive guy, just because then, he's bringing in a good DC, and maybe you lose DCs a little slower than you lose great OCs in this day and age anyways. So maybe that's a preference there. But with the roster the way it is, and the way that he spoke about the roster, like right now, like they should be winning. If this was an underachieving year and you're bringing in another guy, then I imagine your expectations is 11 wins and at least one playoff win. Otherwise, he's now underachieved. And so that suggests to me that instead of maybe a first-time coach, maybe he's looking at more ready-made guys that have had some experience. I mean, again, just a feeling, just a thought. I've got nothing on it. But that's just maybe a sense that I got.
Well, if you did have those expectations, and it would then lead you to believe that somebody who has experience then would be able to take the reins and get you right there to where you would expect the team to be. That is a lot to ask of a rookie head coach.
It is definitely not impossible, though. We've seen a lot of these younger offensive guys come in and make their mark relatively quickly. The one thing that we're not going to be privy to is the presentations in the interviews, man. And you heard Pete talk about it when he went to the Jets and the Patriots, and then ended up, having some time and really focusing his, boiling his philosophy down and applying it at USC. And then having the opportunity to bring that to the Seahawks when he moved to Seattle. And it took him a couple quote unquote failures with those other teams before he really got it together. Maybe that's the normal route for guys. But then again, these days, I mean, you see the LaFleur's and, McVay's and Shanahan's and all that, like they kind of come in and get rocking right out of the gate. So I'd be really interested to know how prepared or how thorough each one of these candidates' philosophy and just complete plan of day-to-day football operations is. Because if you've never done it before, if you've never interviewed for it before, I would imagine that's a daunting task to come up with all that.
And you can only go off of so much that you've learned from being around a head coach, and still you don't know everything that goes into it. So yeah, it's going to be tough. I think some of the younger guys are probably going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to that aspect, but I don't think it rules out anyone necessarily. I think that they do seem very open. I think coming up in the next show, Adam, we're going to talk about all of the candidates who have been suggested or have meetings and interviews coming up. There's a lot of young guys who are still in the playoffs right now. So in some ways, you're waiting to see how these playoffs play out. And I like the idea of being a little patient if it means getting the right guy versus just jumping on who's available right now just so you can get things moving and potentially miss out on someone who might be a little more talented.
The only drawback to that strategy is that there are so darn many head coaching opportunities right now in the NFL to be filled. So you have a lot of competition in, I don't know. Have we heard about the Eagles yet? Last I checked, I had not seen if Sirianni was still there.
I think Sirianni is safe. McCarthy is safe, which I think was the best news of these past few days.
Oh my God. I wanted to make a honorary Better at Life for Jerry Jones this week. I mean, thank you for taking Mike McCarthy out of the mix. Like that, a big relief. He'd be one of the few that I'd be like, no, never that dude. Never that dude.
And a
almost
guy
all these guys, I'm looking at him going, yeah, okay. Like, here we go. Let's see.
And McCarthy would have been the worry because there's a guy with significant ties to Schneider, like a lot of time together, that you would have a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, he even mentioned Mike McCarthy and all the great coaches and stuff that he worked with, as he's rattling off, 1,000 names. But I was like, no, no, please no on that one.
Well, coming up in this next show, like I said, we'll be going through those. And if you have any comments on Pete Carroll, it's kind of going to be a two theme show. The first part's going to be looking at some of the coaches, and this is going to be in the flagship show. So looking ahead to some of the coaches that are going to be interviewed. And then kind of in the second half, talking about some of your emails, thoughts around Pete Carroll. And because we do have quite a few notes on that I want to get to. And so looking ahead, but also looking back and reminiscing a little bit. So that's going to be coming up on our next flagship episode.
For sure. I'm looking forward to getting juiced about all these, possible new guys. I think it's a really fun discussion. It's a lot of cool choices, but also to get into the second half of the show and having a little mini tribute for Pete. God knows the old man earned it. Absolutely earned it. And I guarantee that even the most ardent Pete Carroll haters, like in a couple years from now, I don't know, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 10. I don't know. There's going to be a day that you look back and go, man, I kind of miss the old man.
Yeah. Well, you have to. I mean, how do you not? After all these years of success, how do you not have any kind of sentimentality? You can think that it was time to move on and it was time to move on, but you still have that sense, that piece of and connection with the guy who brought your team its only Super Bowl title.
Oh yeah. And the winningest stretch of football that the franchise has ever seen, and consistency in a way that was positive and fun and different from the rest of the league and kind of revolutionary, especially in the beginning there. Like nobody else was doing a lot of the things Pete was doing. And yeah, I mean, something to be appreciated. I'm looking forward also to learning about whoever the new guy is and seeing the direction and the vision that they have for the team. Because John's right. This roster, better than most people think. And they could be right in the mix again next year. And it's exciting.
And with that idea that, 49ers watch out, Rams watch out. Yeah, maybe we've got the new hotshot coach in the NFC West. A good looking one too.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have to do the handsome scale for all of the coaches because we all know that if you're going to coach in the NFC West, you have to be a handsome man.
Can't be ugly.
So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how they stack up that way too. Might have to get Brittany's opinion on this one.
I feel qualified. I can do it.
Oh, I mean, I'm going to have my 2 cents. Don't get me wrong, but just saying, we might need an opinion from
Yeah.
the fairer sex.
We'll all weigh in on this. How this is an easy, fun thing that you don't you don't need to know anything about football. You just have to have a hotness scale in your head.
That's right. Yep, 1 to 10, baby. Maybe we should make it 1 to 12 because it's Seahawks.
And I think with that,
There's only one thing left to say.
go Hawks.
Go Hawks.